You might not know it, but it knows you. It understands who you are, your sexual orientation, your gender, even if your parents divorced before you were age 21. You live your life online, and the data you leave behind is telling a story. Joining us now for more on that story in New York City via Skype, Christian Rudder. He is the author of Dataclysm, Who We Are When We Think No One's Looking. And Christian, we're happy to have you on TVO tonight. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Very happy to be here.
Just start by telling us about OkCupid, which is this site that you've created that apparently is creating bliss for numerous people all over the place. What's OkCupid?
OkCupid is a dating site that me and three friends started about 10 years ago. And at this point, it's probably the biggest one in the US, definitely very competitive in Canada as well, but we're free. We use a lot of math. Me and all the founders were math majors, so it's a little bit more analytical, hopefully a little bit better than the other ones out there.
What kind of people use it?
I mean, at this point, at least in the US, pretty much everybody who's interested in, who's single, of course. But it's a little bit more coastal, a little bit more techie, but it's pretty mainstream.
And how many people have used it so far?
We've had 30 million accounts total. But dating, people succeed and then they leave because they don't need a dating site anymore once they're dating someone. So we have a lot of rotation through. So maybe like 12 million people a year or 4 million people a month, just kind of cycling on through.
Well, that's it. You did the math in the book and you figured out that X number of people use it, still together, got together, maybe having babies. How many kids do you think have been created as a result of this website that you started?
Oh man, I mean, probably, I don't know, something like 100,000 maybe, I don't know. I mean, we set up about 30,000 dates a day. So, you can kind of work backwards from that to how many kids. I mean, I don't know, as many as 30,000, I guess, if things are really weird. But
okay, and if there's no charge, how do you make money from this?
We show some ads, but it's very basic banner ad stuff, nothing too sophisticated. And then we sell subscriptions, kind of like the way Spotify works, where you can do Spotify Unlimited or whatever they call it, and we have our version of that where you get kind of super features and turn off the ads. If you subscribe, you pay us $10 a month or something.
So are you getting rich off it?
I mean, well, we sold the site to IAC, so Barry Diller is at this point.
Okay, Barry's getting rich off it now, but what did he buy it from you for?
90 million. So that's, yeah, so we also got quite a bit of money out, the four of us too.
Tell me what kind of data people share about themselves on your site.
I mean, a dating site is a peculiar thing because, the end goal is to meet someone in person. Whereas like on Twitter or something, your end goal is to exchange messages through the service. And you're doing it with real people mostly. But it's still very self-contained. And same on Facebook, you're friends with your cousins and your coworkers or whatever, but it's all mediated through Facebook. Whereas on a dating site, we do the mediation and then you go and meet them in person and have a coffee or a beer. And so that's led people to contribute a lot of very personal stuff. Age is important in dating, which it is not important on Twitter, for example, or your race we have found is very important and people give that to us. How tall you are, all this kind of demographic personal stuff that people use to make a decision about a partner, they ultimately also volunteer about themselves. One
of the things I learned from your book was a new acronym that I was not aware of. You have the market cornered on weird data. What is weird data?
Well, that's not exactly true. The weird data stands for white, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, and that acronym was originally applied to classic academic research as a weakness of that research, because typically a scholar will take what's called a convenience sample, which means the convenience part of that is you just get the people that are nearby to be part of your research, which inevitably is like grad students at college, right? So that is a weakness of a lot of past scholarship, and I think the internet data gets away from that. I mean, obviously the problem, certainly the rich part exists, like you can't have a laptop or a phone if you don't have some basic amount of money, but the pervasiveness of things like Facebook and Twitter, at least in the Western world, have allowed researchers, both people who work for companies and academics, to sort of get rid of that weird problem where, 87% of the US, and I assume also of Canada, uses Facebook. That's a huge, huge sample, way more representative than you would get if you pulled 30 co-eds from the quad and ask them some questions.
Sure. Maybe I could get you to amplify a bit on one of the conundrums that you identified in the book, which is this disconnect between what we tell ourselves what we do and what we actually do. What do you mean by that?
Right. Well, I mean, the internet is great because we can ask questions. On OkCupid, we'll ask people, hey, what do you think about interracial relationships, or should people date? Should people be colorblind in dating, or whatever, however you want to phrase it? And it's 2014, and almost nobody is going to profess to being racially biased, because it's taboo. It's just not appropriate, in polite kind of society for sure. But then you can go, so that's what they say. And then when there's ostensibly no one looking, no one asking them what they think, then they go do things like, on a dating site, we find that and this is not just on OkCupid, this is on other dating sites as well, that Black users, for example, are underappreciated by about 25%. They get 25% fewer messages, 25% fewer replies. When they write the message, they get about 25% kind of more no's. The dating sites often have a rating apparatus, and so the ratings are about 25% less. And that's something that I think people do without ever being aware of it, or certainly able to acknowledge it consciously.
So the conclusion is we're more subconsciously racist than we think we are?
I think so, yes. Certainly the data that I've looked at bears that out for sure, because you can ask that same group of people, like, hey, is race important to you in a match? And people are going to be like, no, I'm an open-minded person. Again, it's 2014, that like post-racial supposedly, right? And so people want to think that it's not a factor, but then you can go look and it very clearly is.
Let me read this excerpt from the book, and then I'll get you to comment on it. You talk about Twitter, and you say Twitter is very much the world of the 1%. Its most precious resource, followers, is distributed far more unequally than wealth. In my sample, the top 1% of accounts has 72% of the followers. The top 0.1% has just over half. It is much, much harder to get 1 million followers than it is to make $1 million. Being an American with 1 million Twitter followers is roughly equivalent to being a billionaire. That's a fascinating observation, and I'm wondering how you came to that conclusion.
Well, I mean, I have this big research corpus of Twitter followers, and you can sit there and look at who's got how many followers, and you rank them out. And then also you can go look at the IRS disclosures and stuff like this and find out the number of billionaires is all, Forbes has their lists and all this kind of stuff. And so you just start comparing these things. So that suggested an avenue of inquiry. And then you can find actually public lists, because almost everything on Twitter, unless it's direct messages, is public. And sites will collate, here's everybody that has over 1 million followers. So I went through and counted all those people up. And there's fewer of them than there are billionaires in the US. So it's weird. Social media offers so much kind of leveling or promise. Anybody can become a celebrity, and we've seen it. It's true. You can have a crazy YouTube video or something, and suddenly you're a celebrity, at least for a little while. But at the same time, it's subject that the online world is subject to so many of the same forces that the offline world is.
Well, I wonder what you think that says about the internet as the so-called great equalizer in our society.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of it as a great equalizer. I personally think of it as a great mirror. I mean, it's maybe the mirror is a little warped in places for sure, but I think so much of what happens online has an offline analog, and only when you dig into it do you really start to connect the two worlds, which of course is what I try to do in the book.
Mm-hmm. One of the ways I guess people try to measure who has influence online is by the number of Twitter followers you have. After you've looked at it now, do you think that is a good metric by which we judge these things?
I mean, it's a great top-line metric, but it's subject to all kinds of problems. Just, people can buy followers relatively easily, and people can also have kind of empty followers. I'm willing to guess that you'll find somebody does something outrageous, like the guy from the kid from Target. I can't remember his first name, who became this kind of sensation the last couple weeks here, and maybe his name is Alex. Anyway, he has like hundreds of thousands of Twitter followers or Instagram followers also, because of this kind of sudden celebrity. But my guess is those people in a month aren't going to be taking action on the things that he tweets out. And that's nothing against him. It's just the nature of that kind of impulse follow, if you want to use a word like that. So I think, but whereas somebody following, a serious journalist that they're actually very interested in, or following their friend, that's going to increment the little number of followers by the same one. But I think that one is much more meaningful because there's a real connection, a real interest in what a person has to say.
Let's get you to analyze this chart that we've plucked out of your book now. Sheldon, if you would, let's bring this up. This is Mitt Romney. during his presidential election run. And if we take it from the bottom left, you can see him just sort of moving along tickety-boo. And then as you get to July 22nd at 8 o'clock in the morning, that graph spikes and he suddenly adds almost 20,000 new followers in the course of a minute. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't there, so this wouldn't constitute legal proof, but it is strongly indicative of somebody buying something, or there's some, let me put it this way, there's some ulterior force getting him these followers than people organically coming to his page and be like, you know what, I'm really interested in what Mitt Romney has to say on Twitter. And you know, you don't see natural data like that. Which
means, okay, let's assume that he did pay for it. What's the value in paying for Twitter followers?
You know, I mean, it's almost an axiom, really, that like success begets more success, and nobody wants to back a politician who doesn't seem popular. The entire game of politics is to be popular. That's the means and the end. So, insofar as if you could snap your fingers and have 10, I mean, there's only 20,000, but if you could snap your fingers and have 10 million followers, have the more followers than anyone else in the political sphere, you will seem more popular, and that will make you more popular, I think.
What's the point of buying all these followers when if they're not into you, they're not going to care what you're tweeting anyway?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're all probably mostly bots anyway. They're not even real people, I would guess. Most followers that are for sale are probably bots.
Okay. Well, you've now got this huge pool of data as a result of all of the work that you've done. What do you do with this data? How do you use it?
Well, I mean, the primary use of any company's data, any website's data, is to run the website. I mean, OkCupid keeps track of your age and your race and the men and women that you find attractive and the messages that you write, so that we can do our job of finding you someone to talk to better. You know, at the very least, just because we need to display that information back to you. We keep track of your messages because we have an inbox, just like Gmail or whatever, and you hit inbox and we have to show you what you've been talking about, right? The kind of second order thing, so there's running the business, and then for me, again, because I come from a dating background, it's about figuring out what drives people, what's going to make people want to talk to each other. So it starts to verge into sort of sociological insight, and that's the part of data that I get most excited about. And you see companies like Facebook, they put together a world-class research team to look at stuff that's not directly pertinent to selling ads or to running the news feed or any of the stuff, but to kind of figure out, like, well, how do social networks imply things about people's marriages or imply things about, you know, political leanings and this kind of stuff. Like they're engaging more on the science side of things, which I find really encouraging.
Now, you know, I've got to ask you about the nefarious side of all of this, because of course there are lots of people out there who are deeply concerned about the amount of data being collected and what it's being used for. And we had an example, I think just a week or two ago, where our senior vice president of Uber, this sort of competing taxi service, said he wanted to dig up personal information about journalists who criticized the company. I mean, this gets onto a very slippery slope. I wonder how wary or how concerned you think we ought to be about the amount of data being collected out there about us.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be concerned about, and I find that a lot of issues around privacy and data collection tend to get conflated. I mean, this thing with Uber, that's not that different than like old school, like Dick Nixon, I can't use the word on the radio or the TV here, but you know, like old school politics where you're just gonna like get people through opposition research, if you want to call it that.
Dirty tricks.
Dirty tricks, sure. That's a good way to put it. So you know, that's not that different than just being a jerk, frankly. So and that's always happened, certainly way before the internet, and it will continue to happen forever. But you know, that's not to say that websites, we do have a lot of data. But it's important for the public, I think, to understand is that a company like OkCupid or Facebook, Google for that matter, Twitter, any of these businesses, never look at what an individual is up to. Except in these kind of cases where people are being jerks, and that's something, human nature is a factor always in all this stuff. But you know, it's just not possible. You can't go through and look at what people are doing. There's systems in place to prevent it, and people would be fired. And there's also just no business interest. If Facebook has 1 billion plus users, they don't care what I'm doing or posting about on an individual level. They deal with everything in the aggregate. And I find where things do start to get scary is when people do look in the aggregate, whether it's because someone's being a jerk or because, the way the NSA uses it in the States, where they're like, they're not sitting around asking like, I wonder what 18 to 25-year-old guys are up to, like we might on OkCupid. They're asking like, what is this guy up to? Are we going to pick him up? Are we going to follow him? Who are his friends? And when it gets personal, they look at an individual's data, I completely agree and find it very problematic.
First of all, thank you for keeping the interview clean in a way that you did not keep your book clean. Boy, you love that F-bomb. But that's okay. You're of that age. I get it. Okay. Let me move on. And again, this chart is from your book, and I found this fascinating here because just by looking at what people, quote unquote, like on Facebook, the web knows a lot about us. And we're going to put, let's just put some of this information out here, for example. This is what a group in the United Kingdom, we learned from your book, what they learned from Facebook likes and the accuracy of that information. For example, they can tell if you're gay or straight 88% of the time. They can tell with 75% certainty whether you're lesbian or straight. They can tell with 95% certainty based on your likes whether you're Caucasian or African American. They can tell with 93% certainty whether you're a man or a woman. 85% certainty whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, 65% certainty on whether you're a drug user, and 60% certainty on whether you are the child of parents who got divorced before you were the age of 21. How astonishing did you find all of this information and the fact that the web knows so much about us just based on our Facebook likes?
Yeah, I get asked often what's like the most surprising thing about the book, or what did I most find unusual in putting it together, and that's exactly that table was the most surprising thing to me. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that people can take things that, whatever, the albums, the books that you like, the articles that you like, and then go back and figure out things, or at least make a good guess about things that happen, biographically to you when you were younger. It's pretty insane, even for me, who's pretty experienced in this stuff, to realize. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think people should, ultimately, they volunteered these likes into the Facebook system. Of course, even I, and certainly most users, don't understand what can be implied from those likes. And I think part of the reason I wrote the book is to make more clear to people, or at least anyone who reads it, what becomes of their data, what can be figured out from it. I mean, a lot of the stuff is really interesting. Getting insights into, the racial politics of the world is interesting because race is so taboo, and there's a lot of emotion around it, and there's a lot of history there. But there's another side of it where people can start predicting things about you that, first of all, might not be true. Even 60%, that's a great guess for whether somebody's parents divorced before they were 21, but 60% is 40% of the time wrong. And it just, when you start to think about how people might make decisions about who they're going to hire, or who they're going to insure, or who they're going to rent their apartment to based on this kind of stuff, it does feel uncomfortable. I agree.
That's Christian Rudder. He's the co-founder and president of OkCupid and the author of Dataclysm, Who We Are When We Think No One's Looking. Christian, good of you to be on TVO tonight. Thanks very much.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Support Ontario's public television. Donate at tvo.org.